So putting together, what was it, 15 chapters in 2 weeks, 2 lessons time was quite daunting. So what I basically did was created short overviews for each of the chapters. In this particular Zoom that we're going to do now, this particular overview using the PowerPoint, we're going to go up to the time of Lord Varaha's appearance, because that study was rather recent and should be in everybody's mind kind of more current than what we did all the way back. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. If you're not speaking, please mute so that we can not have the distractions. And I'll go now to the texts. So this is the final lessons of June, lessons 7 and 8 from 2022. Let's see, what did we do? Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 5 through 19. But if you remember, what we did first was in October last year, because the Chatushloki verses were included in the 2nd canto, when Maharaj Pariksit was inquiring what one should do at the end of life, Sukadeva Goswami included that section of the Bhagavat Purana where the Lord himself instructed Brahma. So we studied that first chapter, Adi Lila, of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, just as a reminder for everyone. This is how wisdom descends from the spiritual world to the material world. Now we'll start with chapter 5. Vidura's talks with Maitreya, texts 1 through 17. Vidura meets Maitreya and inquires about the pastimes of the Lord regarding the material world. Vidura said, "O great sage, everyone in this world engages in fruitive activities to attain happiness, but one finds neither satiation nor mitigation of distress. On the contrary, one is only aggravated by such activities. Please, therefore, give us directions on how one should live for real happiness. O great sage, kindly narrate how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the independent, desireless Lord of the 3 worlds and the controller of all energies, accepts incarnations and creates the cosmic manifestation with perfectly arranged regulative principles for its maintenance. You may narrate also about the auspicious characteristics of the Lord in his different incarnations for the welfare of the twice-born, the cows, and the demigods. Our minds are never satisfied completely, although we continuously hear this transcendental activities." One point that really jumped out at me throughout this study was that this question by Vidura, how can one attain happiness? It's amazing the depth into which Maitreya began to answer him. So Sami, you want to choose some readers, please?
Okay. Hare Krishna, everyone. This is a very full review and with a lot of slides, and it's a great summary. So we might have to limit our conversation just a little bit to after we read several different slides. Okay. So we'll start now with Gopa. Gopaji, would you like to read?
Yes. How do you go?
How do you go?
Let's see. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:5-18 through 28. Maitreya describes the first Purusha incarnation and creation of the Mahatattva. Whoops. Hang on.
Hello?
The personality of Godhead, the master of all living entities, existed prior to the creation as one without a second. It is by his will only that creation is made possible. And again, everything merges in him. This supreme self is symptomized by different names. The Lord, the undisputed proprietor of everything, was the only seer. The cosmic manifestation was not present at that time, and thus he felt imperfect without his plenary and separated parts and parcels. The material energy was dormant, whereas the internal potency was manifested. The supreme living being, in his feature as the transcendental Purusha incarnation, who is the Lord's plenary expansion, impregnates the material nature of three modes. And thus, by the influence of eternal time, the living entities appear. Thereafter, influenced by the interactions of eternal time, the supreme sum total of matter, called the Mahatattva, became manifested. And in this Mahatattva, the unalloyed goodness, the Supreme Lord sowed the seeds of universal manifestation out of his own body. Thereafter, the Mahatattva differentiated.
Uh-oh, Ian, you must mute. Ian, please mute. Thank you, sweetie. Hare Krishna. Go on, Gopa. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Hare Krishna.
Thereafter, the Mahatattva differentiated itself into many different forms as the reservoir of the would-be entities. The Mahatattva is chiefly in the mode of ignorance, and it generates the false ego. It is a plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead with full consciousness of creative principles and time for fructifications.
Part of the chapter that I couldn't include because it was just too much in depth was how the Mahatattva expands into different varieties. But that's understood. Everybody, I think, is clear on that.
Okay. Sesha, are you up for this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Please read.
Chapter 6, Creation of the Universal Form. Text 1 through 10. The Lord manifests the Virat Rupa known as Hiranmaya. The Supreme Powerful Lord then simultaneously entered into the 23 elements with the goddess Kali, his external energy, who alone amalgamates all the different elements. Thus, when the personality of Godhead entered into the elements by his energy, all the living entities were enlivened into different activities, just as one is engaged in his work after awaking from a sleep. When the 23 principal elements were set in action by the will of the Supreme, the gigantic universal form, or the Vishwarupa body of the Lord, came into existence. As the Lord, in his plenary portion, entered into the elements of the universal creation, they transformed into gigantic form. They transferred the gigantic form in which all plenary systems and all movable and immovable creations rest. The gigantic Virat Purusha, known as Hiranmaya, lived for 1,000 celestial years on the water of the universe, and all the living entities lay within him.
Thank you, Sesha. Would you like to read the next one?
Okay. 11 through 40, description of the Lord's expanding into varieties of the universal form. Maitreya said, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form. Agni, or heat, separated from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. When the palette of the gigantic form was separately manifest, Varuna, the director of water in the planetary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entity has a facility to taste everything with his tongue. When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the dual Asvini Kumaras entered them in their proper positions. And because of this, the living entity can smell the aromas of everything. Thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, director of light, entered them with the plenary representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms.
Okay, before we go on to the next slides, we have to say a little bit, because this is an elaborate plan by the Lord. Can you say something? And then Gopa, also, if you have something to say about how the elaborate manifestation of this creation is being exhibited by the different potencies. It's an astounding thing. What do you think, Seish?
Well, I'd like to go back just a few slides before that to one of the first ones we read today, which described how the Lord felt incomplete because he didn't have his, basically it's his parts and parcels manifest. And so it was amazing that all this creation is based on, he felt imperfect with plenary and separated parts and parcels. I mean, he cares about us, I mean, that he doesn't have us working with him, loving him. So that struck me.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
then all that follows from his feeling imperfect and complete.
Beautiful. Thank you. Gopa, what's your realization? And there's Nanda. This second Nanda. Gopa, do you have something to add to that? Okay, Nanda, you say what you were going to say first. Nandaji.
Well, yeah, it's just two things. Based on one thing, what Cesar just said is the Lord was missing, feeling separation from his parts and parcels. He's a person. Again, Prabhupada stresses that throughout. He's a person. And yet the impersonalist contamination has come across us so much that we're, hardly people believe in a God that's a person. And another thing, based on the last slokas of management, universal management, is that there's a plan, again, a person behind it all. And yet so many of us fail to see the hand of the Lord behind everything, just how potent his personal energy is, but also how potent his illusory energy is.
Gosh, thank you, Nanda. That's very profound. Okay,
Tisha had a hand raised.
Oh, Tisha, do you have a hand raised? Okay, we can't hear you. It doesn't look.
Hare Krishna, everybody. I'm sorry, I'm on my iPad. If I have my hand raised, I don't know how to unraise it.
Okay, don't worry. It's not,
Okay.
We don't see it right. Okay, we can always use our own hands. Okay, thank you, Tisha. All right, let's go on with the Madhurya Leader reading the next slide. Thank you.
Just to note that we also read and spent some time, because there was such an in-depth description. Sesha just read very nicely just a few of the verses about how Garbhodakshaya Vishnu actually expanded himself throughout the entire universe, and then different divisions of the creation manifested. So a lot of the times devotees have this kind of poo-poo attitude toward the universal form of the Lord, because there's so many different comments about how it's mostly for the impersonalists. But because we had read about it at the very beginning of Sukadev Goswami's instructions to Maharaj Parekh, the first chapter in the second canto is called The First Step in God Realization. And because there's a whole chapter of it in the Bhagavad Gita, when the Lord was with Arjuna at this essential time of instruction for humanity, he showed his universal form. And because now in third canto, Maitreya is so descript about what it is, we took time to study from the Bhagavad Gita, the verses and the vision that Krishna showed to Arjuna, just kind of re-emphasizing what Nanda and Sesha were talking about, how everything's a plan, it's all personal, and the Lord is everywhere and in everything. So, Madhurya Leela.
Chapter 7, Further Inquiries by Vidura. Bhagavatam 3.7, 1-7. Sri Vidura said, O great Brahmana, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the complete spiritual whole and is unchangeable, how is he connected with the material modes of nature and their activities? If this is his pastime, how do the activities of the unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the modes of nature? The pure soul is pure consciousness and is never out of consciousness, either due to circumstances, time, situations, dreams, or other causes. How then does he become engaged in meshes? The Lord, as a supersoul, is situated in every living being's heart. Why then do the living entities' activities result in misfortune and misery?
Go on with the next slide, Madhurya.
This is chapter 7, 8-14. Maitreya explains the problem of misconception and self-identity and the remedy. The living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity. He has no factual background, like a man who dreams that he sees his head cut off. As the moon reflected on water appears to the seer to tremble due to being associated with the quality of the water, so the self associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter. But that misconception of self-identity can be diminished gradually by the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, through the process of devotional service to the Lord in the mode of detachment. When the senses are satisfied in the seer supersoul, the personality of Godhead, and merge in him, all miseries are completely vanquished as after a sound sleep. Simply by chanting and hearing of the transcendental name, form, etc. of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one can achieve the cessation of unlimited miserable conditions. Therefore, what to speak of those who have attained attraction for serving the flavor of the dust of the Lord's lotus feet?
Okay, don't change the slide. Go back to, but the misconception of self-identity. Read that again. Don't change, yeah.
But that misconception of self-identity can be diminished gradually by the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, through the process of devotional service to the Lord in the mode of detachment.
Okay, so now you got to tell us about that, because it seems like everybody has an identity crisis. What can you say about this?
Well, they're thinking they're they're it. They're the Lord and supreme of everything that they survey. But the real self-identity is that we're servants of the Lord and devotees. So if we fulfill that conception of service to the Lord, servants of the Lord, then everything else will come very naturally and be very pleasant.
Wonderful. Anyone else have something to add to that? Hati? Unmute, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to share a thread that also manifested here. If you remember, at the very beginning of the third canto, we discussed this last week when we were discussing the first 4 chapters when Vidura met Uddhava. But even prior to that meeting, Sukadeva Goswami begins the third canto by saying to Maharaj Pariksit, this question was also asked by Vidura. So he was referring back to chapter 8 of the second canto, prior to the descriptions of the Chaturshloki, because after hearing about the universal form of the Lord and the Lord in the heart from Sukadeva Goswami, Maharaj Parikshit became enthused and enlivened, just the same as in this chapter. It's Vidura inquires from Maitreya, because after hearing about the creation of this material manifestation, the Lord entering into it and manifesting the universal form, he had questions. So Sukadeva Goswami referred all the way back to this conversation as an answer to Maharaj Parikshit's original question. These questions right here are the main questions, which are the thread as to what's being described throughout this whole section of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, Sami, you want to have somebody else read just these questions again?
Oh,
Because
okay.
they're really sweet.
Okay. I was going to ask Nanda to read, but okay, I forgot it, but it was a good point that I forgot. Nandaji, can you please read?
Yes, so
Thank you.
Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 7th chapter, 1-7. Vidura, Sri Vidura said, "O great Brahman, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the complete spiritual whole and is unchangeable, how is he connected with the material modes of nature and their activities? If this is his pastime, how do the activities of the unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the modes of nature? The pure soul is pure consciousness and is never out of consciousness, either due to circumstances, time, situations, dreams, or other causes. How then does he become engaged in nescience? The Lord as the supersoul is situated in every living being's heart. Why then do the living entities achieve results in misfortune and miseries?" Oh, no, well, I read that wrong. Why then do the living entities' activities result in misfortune and misery?
Go on with the next slide, and then I'd like you to tell us your realization. Oh, wait, no. Pati, that's not the next slide.
We already read that previous.
The
We
living
did.
entity distress.
We already read that about misconception.
Yeah,
of
we
the
did.
Identity.
I agree.
I just wanted to go back
Okay.
and reiterate that
What?
these questions by Vidura are the foundational point to which all the other questions and descriptions
What?
are going on. Why, since the Lord is unchangeable, how is it that he manifests pastimes without the help of the modes of nature? How is the living, if the Lord is in the heart of the living entity and guiding him, why does the living entity experience distress? And what was the third one? The Lord and the pure soul is pure conscious, never out of consciousness. How then does he become engaged in nescience? These are the three basic questions.
Okay, so you have taken out 3, 7, 8 to 14.
I didn't take it out. We just already read it. Madhurya Leela just read it.
Oh, I'm over.
The initial answer that Maitreya gave was that the living entity is in,
Okay.
he has a problem with self-identity. That's the
Oh,
root
I'm
cause.
sorry. This
Okay.
is okay, this I
Now
had it wrong.
now
in
we're
my-
skipping ahead to the next chapter.
Okay. Nandaji, did you want to comment thus far before we go on?
No, but they're great questions, aren't they? You know what I mean? In the sense that, like, how is it that the pure living entity gets engaged in nescience if he's pure? Yeah, they're great questions. I wish it was an easy answer or easy solution, meaning.
Solution is easy, but execution is a little bit difficult. No? Okay, let's go
Actually,
on.
since it just came up, this is the answer.
Okay,
Oh,
Nanda,
no.
go on.
No, this was the answer.
What's the answer?
That
7, 8,
misconception of
14.
self-identity can be diminished. This is the answer right here, hearing and
Yeah,
chanting
but
about the
look,
Lord.
But the word gradually, that's very important. So we don't get impatient, because that does.
Right. Oh, Tatenu Kampam Shushan Bhikshamano, right? Good. All right, so you want to go on, Nanda? To introduce
Sure,
us to this
sure,
next
sure.
one?
Sure. Chapter 8, manifestation of Brahma from Garbhodakshai Vishnu. 3:8, 1-9. To answer Vidura's inquiries, Maitreya explains that he will narrate the Bhagavat Purana. Let me now begin speaking on the Bhagavat Purana, which was directly spoken to the great sages by the personality of Godhead, for the benefit of those who are entangled in the extreme miseries for the sake of very little pleasure. That's so, poetic right there. Extreme miseries for the sake of very little pleasure. Okay, sorry. Some time ago, being inquisitive to know, Sanat Kumar, chief of the boy saints, accompanied by other great sages, inquired exactly like you about the truths regarding Vasudev, the Supreme, from Lord Sankarshan, who is seated at the bottom of the universe. Lord Sankarshan thus spoke the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam to the great sage Sanat Kumar, who had already taken the vow of renunciation. Sanat Kumar also, in his turn, when inquired of by Sankyayana Muni, explained Srimad Bhagavatam as he had heard it from Sankarshan.
Wow. So this is our disciplic succession, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you want to say, Nandaji, before?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Faye, you want to read?
Hare Krishna. Verses 8, chapter 8, 10 through 22. The appearance of Brahma from Garbhodaksha Vishnu and Brahma's attempt to find his origin. The subtle subject matter of creation on which the Lord's attention was fixed was agitated by the material mode of passion, and thus the subtle form of creation pierced through his abdomen. Piercing through, the sum total form of the fruitive activity of all living entities took the shape of the bud of a lotus flower generated from the personality of Vishnu, and by his supreme will, it illuminated everything like the sun and dried up the vast waters of devastation. Into that universal lotus flower, Lord Vishnu personally entered as the supersoul, and when it was thus impregnated with all the modes of material nature, the personality of Vedic wisdom, whom we call the self-born, was generated.
Thank you, Faye. You want to go on to the next one?
Yes, Mataji. Lord Brahma, in his ignorance, contemplated, who am I that am situated on the top of this lotus? Wherefrom has it sprouted? There must be something downwards, and that from which this lotus has grown must be within the water. Lord Brahma, thus contemplating, entered the water through the channel of the stem of the lotus. But in spite of entering the stem and going nearer to the navel of Vishnu, he could not trace out the root. Thereafter, being unable to achieve the desired destination, he retired from such searching and came back again to the top of the lotus. Thus, controlling all objectives, he concentrated his mind on the Supreme Lord. At the end of Brahma's 100 years, when his meditation was complete, he developed the required knowledge, and as a result, he could see in his heart the Supreme within himself, whom he could not see before with the greatest endeavor.
Thank you, Faye. This is very interesting that through trying to find the Lord externally, looking, it seems pretty much almost impossible that Lord Brahma could not go to the eternally deep through the lotus stem to it is a chasm that's eternal. He couldn't get there, and the only solution was to go internally. I think that's really a far out instruction, because we are also being bombarded by everything in the material world, trying to receive some kind of confirmation from the outside world that sometimes isn't there. These books, this transcendental knowledge, takes us inside of our own hearts and just reading them purifies us to the point of where actually we can see the absolute truth manifest there. What do you think? Anyone? Faye, what you read this? What do you think about this section?
I'm excited about the verses that are coming next that tell us a little bit about just how Brahma got that knowledge and the source and the inspiration that's coming. Brahmaji was exemplary in that he looked, that he meditated, that he tried, but by his own prowess, he had no answers. Someone else has those answers. His name is Krishna. So that's coming next.
Who is also
The Supreme
Lord
Personality of Godhead.
definitely, and Lord Brahma's guru. He's
Exactly.
the spiritual master.
Yes, ma'am.
That's why we seek transcendental knowledge through the self-realized soul. We cannot get it through any other source. Thank you, Faye. That was wonderful. Let's go on with the next, unless someone has something to
Yeah,
say more about this.
I just wanted to
Betsy.
point out one thing that's important in answer to Maitreya's, to Vidura's question and Mara's Prickett's question about why the living entity suffers, although he really doesn't want to. He's pure consciousness. He got the Lord in his heart, but still he suffers in this material world. This statement here gives the root cause.
Oh, yeah.
The sum total, piercing through this sum total form of the fruitive activity of the living entities took the shape of a bud of a lotus flower generated from the personality of Vishnu. So basically what's happening in this material world is that all the desires of the living entity are being fulfilled. That's why it's created, to fulfill the desires of the living entities. And in the course of that sojourn, to correct their misuse of independence. We always hear this, but here we're reading about the actual fundamental architectural engineering process by which it takes place.
Piercing through the fruitive activities of all the conditioned souls. That is really, what a conception, and makes me really want to go back to Godhead, really. Can you imagine the energy? That's why it's very hard to get out of this material world. How can we get out? How can we fight this? But we have Harinam Sankirtan. Lord Chaitanya has brought it, and it's descended from the spiritual world. That is the only way that we can get out of here. We are like tightly fixed. Jeez. Thank you. Manvantaraji, would you like to read?
Thank you. May I just comment real quickly?
Sure,
about
please.
It kind of reminded me of Gayatri, when you're doing your Gayatri and you have to look inward and you're trying to find Krishna within the heart, but the meditation, at least for me, doesn't bring me there. But isn't it like the same thing, Brahma seeking out? No.
Really, very good. That's a perfect example. You know, we're forced to chant silently. So what does that mean? That means inside, right? Very good. I think you're right about that. Thank you.
The Lord reveals himself to Brahma from within his heart. Chapter 3, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 8, texts 23 through 32. At the end of Brahma's 100 years, when his meditation was complete, he developed the required knowledge, and as a result, he could see in his heart the Supreme within himself, whom he could not see before with the greatest endeavor. Brahma could see that on the water there was a gigantic lotus-like white bedstead, the body of Seshanaga, on which the personality of Godhead was lying alone. The whole atmosphere was illuminated by the rays of the jewels depicting the hood of Seshanaga, and that illumination dissipated all the darkness of those regions. When Lord Brahma, the maker of the universal destination, thus saw the Lord, he simultaneously glanced over creation. Lord Brahma saw the lake in Lord Vishnu's navel and the lotus flower, as well as the devastating water, the drying air, and the sky, all became visible to him. Lord Brahma, thus being surcharged with the mode of passion, became inclined to create, and after seeing the 5 causes of creation indicated by the personality of Godhead, I can't see the later part, the other words.
Okay. He began to offer his respectful prayers on the path of creative mentality.
Thank you.
Okay, before we go on to the next section, which I'd like you to continue reading, Mambatarchi. Patsy, did you want to say something about the 5 causes of creation?
We spoke about it this morning. These 5 causes of creation are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. They're the elements by which Lord Brahma, they've already been created by Krishna, by Mahavishnu, and his glance over the Mahatattva. The Mahatattva created the different elements. Then the universes were also manifest, and Garbhodakshayi Vishnu entered within each universe, so that the elements of the universal construction are there from the initial sarga, and Brahma will use them in his creation of Visarga.
So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the living entity, even Lord Brahma, is very small. How can he possibly see the extent of this universe and Garbhodakshayi Vishnu and lying in the ocean and seeing it dry up? How can he see anything of that? Even like on you can't see, if you're very small, you can't see the whole picture. So the only way he could see it would be to go inside. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Sesha? Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Sesha.
Seshaji, could you tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of revelation. It appears to me it's a matter of revelation. And where does that revelation take place? Good in the heart.
Yeah, good.
Same thing with Arjuna. I mean, obviously, he was sitting on the chariot on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He didn't see with his external eyes all the different descriptions that he started to describe. They were kind of like Krishna said, "I'll give you the eyes to see them." That means it was an internal revelation. I think it's called sporti.
Yeah, it's very exciting actually to realize that we can have these visions if we know where to look and if we purify. That's why the whole human life is meant for purification of one's existence. Why? So we can see clearly within. Very wonderful. Thank you for that, Sesha. And shall we go on with the next part, and Manvantara will continue to read? Manvantarji.
Chapter 9, Brahma's prayers were creative energy. Brahma's prayers were prayers to the Lord. Oh my Lord, the people of the world are embarrassed by all kinds of anxieties. They are always afraid. They always try to protect wealth, body, and friends. They are filled with lamentation and unlawful desires and paraphernalia, and they avariciously base their undertakings on the perishable conceptions of my and mine. As long as they do not take shelter of your safe lotus feet, they are full of such anxieties. O great actor, my Lord, all these poor creatures are constantly perplexed by hunger, thirst, severe cold, secretion and bile, attacked by coughing winter, blasting summer, rains, and many other disturbing elements, and overwhelmed by strong sex urges and indefatigable anger. I take pity on them, and I am very much aggrieved for them. O my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you.
Wow. Two very important points struck me in this. One, how the Lord Brahma is having pity for the conditioned soul. He takes pity on them. And that is real. And he has a thankless task of creating this whole thing so that they can fulfill their illusory desires. What do you think about that, Manvantara? Taking pity on the conditioned soul like that.
I totally appreciate his empathy.
Me too.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Okay, then the other thing is that Krishna will appear to the soul as he has been worshipped. Nanda, can you comment on that one? That Krishna will appear.
Well, that's one of my favorite verses in this series of Lord Brahma's prayers to the Lord, that he's revealed, but here it is, above what you've highlighted, they can see you through the ears. So it's same verse, but it's the beginning of the same verse. Oh my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing. So whatever it is that we're constantly hearing about, if it's the form of Lord Ram, or if it's the form of Lord Varaha, or whomever our favorite form of the Lord is that we're hearing about, then he reveals himself to us. I think that's very, merciful, wonderful, it's, awe-inspiring. So, and that's again stressing the process of repeated hearing.
Yeah, and what about the fact that someone might have, just like we see it manifest in Lord Chaitanya's Leela, someone might have an attraction to a different form of the Lord.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
say something about that.
Well, the example is there. Murari Gupta, he was asked to give up his, worshiping of Lord Ram, and he said, "I can't do it. I've sold out my head." And he said, "So please just let me die for not being able to follow your instructions." And Lord Chaitanya said, "No, glorious is the servant who can't give up the service of his master, and glorious is the master who won't let his servant give it up either." So I mean, and I believe it's the 6th canto, but I could be wrong. And when they're referencing Prahlad's story, so I think it's before the story of Prahlad. I mean, I know it's before the story of Prahlad, but anyway. So in one of the purports, Srila Sanatana Goswami says that the Lord has unlimited qualities because there are unlimited living entities. And every living entity has a particular attraction to the Lord in a certain way. And therefore he has unlimited qualities. So we have a unique individual, attraction to the Lord, and he facilitates that. That's how magnanimous and great he is.
I'd like to add a little teeny bit to that in the 2nd Shikshastika, the Lord Chaitanya says, "Oh my Lord, your holy name alone can benedict all living entities." Thus you have hundreds and millions of names. And so Bhakti Vinod comments on that. Why does the Lord have so many millions of names? Because there are so many living entities who worship him in so many different ways. So that's a confirmation too. Okay, now that's the signal. Ian, thank you, Nandaji. Ian, can you read, Prabhu? Very slowly and loudly and clearly. Slow, okay?
Okay, I try. Can you hear me?
Okay, thank you. Yes, we can hear you.
Krishna to everybody. Okay, chapter 10, Visions of the Creation.
Good.
Let me put on my glasses. Okay, now, the deer inquired from my chair, "O my Lord, O greatly learned sage, can describe eternal time, which is another form of the Supreme Lord, wonderful actor. What are the symptoms of that eternal time? Please describe them to us in detail." 3:10:11 to 18, my chair answers. Explaining eternal time in terms of various divisions of the creation, beginning with the Lord's original creation. Matthew said, eternal time is the primeval source of the interactions of the 3 modes of material nature. It is unchangeable and limitless, and it works as an instrument of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his pastime in the material creation. This cosmic manifestation is separated from the Lord, the Supreme Lord, as material energy by means of color, which is the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Lord. It is situated as the objective manifestation of the Lord under the influence of the same material energy of Vishnu.
Okay, thank you. Can you read another one slowly? You're doing great.
Okay, okay.
Slow.
Okay. There are 9 different kinds of creations, besides the one which naturally occurs due to the interactions of the modes. There are 3 kinds of annihilations due to eternal time, matter elements, and the quality of one's work. Of the 9 creations, the first one is the creation of Mahat Tattva, or the sum total of material ingredients, wherein the modes interact due to the presence of the Supreme Lord. The second, the false ego is generated, in which the material ingredients, material knowledge, and material activity arise. O good believer, these last 3 creations and the creation of demigods, the 10th creation, are Prakrita creations, which are different from the previously described Prakrita natural creations. The appearance of the Kumaras is both. The 8th creation is that of the lost species of life, and they are of different varieties, numbering 28. They are all extensively foolish and ignorant. They know their desires by smell, but are unable to remember anything within the heart.
Wow. Okay, say a little bit about that last sentence. These lower forms of life are not able to remember anything within the heart. And we had this whole discussion, and we see Lord Brahma is becoming self-realized through the heart. What do you think?
So this could be the lower species like the animals, I suppose.
Yeah.
There could be the animals. Lower species of life, and there are different varieties, number 28.
Right, lower species of life.
Foolish and ignorant. They know their desires is blessed. Okay, so a dog would, walk around this sniffing and so it could be low. It seems that they are the lowest species of life. Yeah,
and what happens? What is a human being who is not inquiring about these things? And a human being has the facility to, but if he doesn't look within to inquire about these things, what are they compared to?
Well, they would compare to animals, I think.
Yeah, right. Lower species of life, absolutely. So it's our duty, isn't it? It's our duty to become Krishna conscious.
Yes.
It's this very serious program. We have to do this. We really do, to fulfill the mission of human life. Thank you, Ian. Okay, thank you. Okay, Tisha, would you like to read?
Yes, thank you, Mataji, everyone. Chapter 2, right? Calculation of time from the atom.
No, it's chapter 11.
11, sorry. Okay, chapter 11, calculation of time from the atom. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:11, 1 through 17, how time is calculated. Atoms are the ultimate state of the manifest universe. When they stay in their own forms without forming different bodies, they are called the unlimited oneness. They are certainly different bodies in physical forms, but the atoms themselves form the complete manifestation. One can estimate time by measuring the movement of the atomic combination of bodies. Time is the potency of the Almighty Personality of Godhead, Hari, who controls all physical movement, although he is not visible in the physical world. Atomic time is measured according to its covering a particular atomic space. That time which covers the unmanifest aggregate of atoms is called the great time.
Is that clear to everyone, how time is calculated?
How clear does it have to be?
It's confusing.
Okay, because there was a much more mathematical explanation into the particular segments of time, like seconds, minutes, hours, days. The atomic time is measured, just like even we have now atomic time,
Right.
many clocks. There are atoms in space, and the amount of time it takes for the sun to travel over a particular amount of atoms constitute the different segments of time. And those were all described according to their Sanskrit names in the chapter. But basically, it's like X amount of atoms that are covered equal a second. If you have 60 of those, it equals a minute. If you have 60 times that amount of atoms, it ends up an hour. So it's very, very mathematically precise and quite simple to figure out. But that's what it means. How many atoms are covered by the sun's movements constitute time, how it's calculated.
You know, also Prabhupada said that one verse of the Bhagavatam we can study for 3 months at least. You know, this is the sublime, supreme cream of the Vedas knowledge. So we don't have to understand everything completely, but we have to understand the essence of everything completely, or to the extent that we can, which is, what is the essence of all knowledge? Tisha, can you tell me that? What is the essence of all of this?
The essence of all of this is that we are servants of our Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, and that if we can remember him and search him out within our hearts, then we'll go back home, back to Godhead.
Okay. So we're hearing about his potencies to become attracted and to understand that. Very well put, Dolly. Very good. These details, this is extremely important to fill our minds with this, all of this transcendental knowledge about Krishna, because otherwise, what else is going to come in? You know, there's a whole plethora of things. We're just waiting. Thank you, Tisha. Did you read 2 slides? Did you? You don't know.
Just one.
read. Okay, read the next one.
Okay.
Before we go on, just explaining about how it's broken up. This described how time is calculated. We just discussed that. Now, how that time influences material life. Go ahead, Tisha.
Okay. In the creation, during Brahma's day, the 3 planetary systems, Svarga, Martya, and Patala, revolve, and the inhabitants, including the lower animals, human beings, demigods, and pittas, appear and disappear in terms of their fruitive activities. When the night of Brahma ensues, all the 3 worlds are out of sight, and the sun and the moon are without glare, just as in the due course of an ordinary night. The devastation takes place due to the fire emanating from the mouth of Shankarsan, and thus great sages like Bhrigu and other inhabitants of Mahar Loka transport themselves to Yana Loka, being distressed by the warmth of the blazing fire which rages through the 3 worlds below. The 100 years of Brahma's life are divided into 2 parts, the first half and the second half. The first half of the duration of Brahma's life is already over, and the second half is now current.
Thank you.
So basically, at this point, there's almost a transformation. There's like a notable heading, if it were, or new section. Maitreya has explained to Vidura the basic concept of the creation, from the Lord Mahavishnu glancing over material nature, then the Lord entering each one of the universes, and as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, manifesting Brahma with his concomitant living entities who are under control in that universe. And now he's explained how time works in that universe. So the next section will go on to Brahma and the population of the universe. So everything's set. The setting has been made. Now the stage is set. And now activities will begin by the living entities.
Just want to mention one thing. The other day, Narayani, our God sister Narayani, gave a wonderful class, and she was glorifying the Bhagavatam. And we are so fortunate that we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, that we can dedicate our lives to hearing this transcendental knowledge. And we'll see over the years, you understand more and more. It becomes part of your life. You don't want to hear anything else except the cream of Vedic knowledge. Why would you? Because we're getting purified. This is so I really appreciate this association, and I have to thank my good husband for making this happen. It is such a glorious activity. Thank you. Okay, so now let's go on, and thank you, Tisha, for being such a steady, serious devotee. Thank you. Chapter 12, creation of the Kumaras and others. Gopaji, could you please read?
Yes. Let's see.
Thank you.
Srimad Bhagavatam 3:12, 1 through 20. Creations by Brahma. Nesh engagements, the four Kumaras and Rudra. Brahma first created the nescient. Brahma first created the nescient engagements like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's real identity. Brahma spoke to his sons after generating them. My dear sons, he said, now generate progeny. But due to their being attached to Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they aimed at liberation, and therefore they expressed their unwillingness. On the refusal of the sons to obey the order of their father, there was much anger generated in the mind of Brahma, which he tried to control and not express. Although he tried to curb his anger, it came out from between his eyebrows, and a child mixed blue and red was immediately generated.
And of course, that was Rudra.
Rudra. Okay. We're going on? Okay. Brahma. Brahma, who was empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of generating living entities and begot 10 sons for the extension of the generations. Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulasya, Pulaha, Kretu, Brigu, Vaishishta, Daksha, and the 10th son, Narada, were thus born. Religion was manifested from the breast of Brahma, wherein it seated the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan. And irreligion appeared from his back, where horrible death takes place for the living entity.
Okay, I'd like to ask a question. Gopa, what is it? We hear now that the first thing that Lord Brahma had to create were all of these horrendous, horrible ignorance and horrible things in the universe. What? I don't understand that. How is that? That Lord Brahma, his first thing to create was everything that will make the conditioned soul forget his true identity, and not only that, terrorize him. Who has the answer for that? Gopa, do you know? Can you
No.
some light on that? Who knows that? Nandaji, save us.
Well, it's not that I know it, but it has to do with the question in the beginning. When, sorry if it's Maitreya or Vidura, whoever asked that question, is how is it that the living entity who's pure, how does he get entangled in the material world? He gets entangled because as soon as he has that material desire, then all of those systems of forgetfulness are put in place, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to survive for a minute. But it's amazing, isn't it? That all of those things are created first, and then the living entity comes into the material world covered by those 5 kinds of creation, illusions. It's not easy to get out. I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying it's difficult.
But the first thing that Brahma created is all this horrendous things. Pati, what do you have to say about that? Unmute, please.
Again, we're back to the exact same thing that Nanda says. It's the desire of the living entity. Srila Prabhupada gives the example that there's a child who wants something, and the parent knows that it's better not for the child to do it or have it. So he said no. And the child keeps continuing to press the point. Finally, he said, okay, go ahead and do it, but the responsibility is up to you. So the living entity, who is part and parcel of the Lord, has as part of his inherent constitutional nature, independence, because the Lord is supremely independent, and the part and parcel has little quantities of the same thing. So that independent requirement, that independent nature has to be fulfilled, and that sum total of them together creates this whole manifestation as a reciprocal act by the Lord. And the very first qualifications, let's put them up again, in order to live in that unconstitutional state, because in their constitutional position, the living entities are servants of the Lord, but they want to be enjoyers. So in order to create that environment, it means that there must be an illusion. So these illusions: self-deception, a sense of death, anger after frustration, a sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's real identity are the first coverings, the most subtle coverings of every living entity in this universe, because it's required, otherwise the living entity wouldn't stay here. There needs to be a place for it to fulfill its desires.
Tisha has a question, and then Nanda. Tisha?
Yeah, I just thinking about this, because you would say, well, why didn't Brahma create happiness and joy and good tasting things and make it so beautiful? Why didn't he create that first? But then, if you think about it, if everything is so nice here, then you'll never look to go back home, back to Godhead, because you'll be enjoying the niceness of the material world. And then your desire to find your true self, to go back home, it would be harder to, question, who am I? Why am I here? If you enjoyed everything.
And actually, another thing we can add to that is, in order for the living entity to survive here, he has to be an illusion. The first thing that has to happen is that the false ego, I am this body. He has to, otherwise he can't fulfill his desire.
Yeah.
And of course,
Very nice point, Tisha. Very, very good. Insightful.
Nanda, did you want to add something to that?
Just a quick point on Tisha's point. And at the same time, he didn't make it all wonderful, but he put enough nice things in there to keep us going on trying to be an illusion. Interesting, huh? I was just today in Alachua we had Chaitanya Charitamrita class, and it was on these points. And I can't remember the Sanskrit. It's a really hard abhinasha, and the covering and the pushing potency and the covering potency. And I can never, as many times as I try to remember them, they're long and hard to say. But anyway, that's when the living entity wants to turn their back on the Lord, then immediately they're covered and then they're pushed. So they're covered by these nescient activities that Brahma had, and then they're pushed to try to fulfill them. Just, if you didn't do it right this time, just try another way. They're completely entangled. So can I ask a quick question?
Sure. Yes, of course.
Okay, it's in relation to that, because even though I just said that, so the living entities in the spiritual world and somehow are a desire due to their independence and their tininess develops to try to be the enjoyer. So it's not that at that particular point they have lots of desires. They just have maybe a few desires, right? And then they come, and then by being entangled, their desires increase. That's the question. That's the part of my question.
Well, I would think that it's first you have the desire, one main desire. The desire is not to serve Krishna, just that I am the enjoyer, to enjoy. And then according to the different modes of nature that we contact, then it starts to grow. It's like the seed. The seed is this ahankar, that I'm the enjoyer, and then everything spreads from that. Is that okay, Pati? Can you add something to that?
Sure, let's hear what Sesha also says.
Oh, Seshaji.
Well, the desires that entrap the living entity are referred to as a network. And networks have a tendency to build. That's what networking is.
Yeah.
So they build on one another and keep growing to the point where now we're so covered with desires that not this lifetime, not next time, 100 lifetimes from now, we have some desire that's in our heart right now, waiting to be fulfilled after all that time.
Oh,
So it's a very entangling. We use that word a lot, entangling. It's a very entangling situation for the spirit soul.
yeah.
Fortunately, it can all be kicked out by Krishna. If we
Okay.
get shelter of him.
Does that help, Nanda?
Yes.
Also that entangling feature that Sesha made me think of the banyan tree. As the living entity remains in the material world, going through the cycles of births and deaths, it naturally becomes conditioned by the modes of nature, and that initial desire manifests itself in hundreds and thousands and unlimited ways, just like the banyan tree. There's no beginning, there's no end. And they have it's the nature of this cosmic manifestation, the entire material jagat, that as the bodies go through samsara, as the living entity goes through them, finally they come to the point of frustration and ask, how can I stop this? And then the desire changes. It's like gone down to the bottom, and then it starts to come so slowly up. Do you, Leela?
Well, it's also like Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in his song that while the living entity is in the womb, that he prays to Krishna to engage him, and he'll never forget him, just get him out of this condition. But then as soon as he comes out, he's surrounded by loving parents and others, and then he forgets. And so he becomes more and more entangled.
Yes, nice.
Thank you.
Just to go back a second, Nanda, my understanding of what you were talking about was kind of the other way around. It's not, my understanding is the prakshipatmika, well, actually they're kind of interactive. That you get pushed into a certain circumstance. Prakshipatmika, I remember it because of the P, means push. Prakshipatmika pushes the living entity into a particular environment, and then avaranatmika covers that living entity to make him think he or she is satisfied and that this is a good condition and I can find pleasure here. And then again, you get pushed, and then again, you get covered.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, we're lucky for Lord Chaitanya. We're lucky that Prabhupada came, and we're lucky that we only have to chant Hare Krishna, and that all the coverings will go. We just read it, that it will dissipate if we go internal.
And we're lucky to have Sama remind us.
Actually, I'm trying to remind myself, the holy name and Prabhupada's words. That's all we need. Okay. Thank you. Now, Seshaji, would you like to continue for us?
Srimad Bhagavatam 3:12, 34 through 48. The Vedas are generated along with other aspects of education. Once upon a time, when Brahma was thinking how to create the worlds as in the past millennium, the 4 Vedas, which contain all varieties of knowledge, became manifested from his 4 mouths. Beginning from the front face of Brahma, gradually the 4 Vedas, Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva, became manifested. Thereafter, Vedic hymns, which had not been pronounced before, priestly rituals, the subject matter of the recitation, and transcendental activities were all established one after another. He also created the medical science, military art, musical art, and architectural science, all from the Vedas. They all emanated one after another, beginning from the front face. Then he created the fifth Vedas, the Puranas, and the histories, all from his mouths, since he could see all the past, present, and future.
Go on, Seshaji.
Brahma thought to himself, alas, it is wonderful that in spite of my being scattered all over, there is still insufficient population throughout the universe. There is no other cause for this misfortune but destiny. This is Swayambhuvamana, the reservoir of good qualities. Let's see. While he was thus absorbed in contemplation and was observing the supernatural power, two other forms generated from his body. They are still celebrated as the body of Brahma. One of them, one who had the male form, became known as Manu, named Swayambhuvamana, and the woman became known as Sadarupa, the queen of the great soul Manu. Thereafter, by sex indulgence, they gradually increased the population, increased generations of population one after another.
All right. Thank you, Seshaji. Do you have something to say about this, Prabhu?
No.
Okay. Very profound. It's so complicated. Isn't it? It seems very complicated sometimes very complicated, and Lord Chaitanya has come to make it very simple. All right, let's go on with Madhurya Leela.
Chapter 13, the appearance of Lord Varaha. Bhagavatam 3:13, 1-15, conversation between Brahma and Manu. Lord Brahma said, since you are my very obedient son, I ask you to beget children qualified like yourself in the womb of your wife. Rule the world in pursuance of the principles of devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus worship the Lord by performances of yajna. O King, if you can give proper protection to the living beings in the material world, that will be the best service for me. When the Supreme Lord sees you to be a good protector of the conditioned souls, certainly the master of the senses will be very pleased with you. Sri Manu said, O all-powerful Lord, O killer of all sins, I shall abide by your order. Now please let me know my place and that of the living entities born of me. O master of the demigods, please attempt to lift the earth, which is merged in the great water, because it is the dwelling place for all living entities. It can be done by your endeavor and by the mercy of the Lord.
Yeah, what about, before we go on to the next slide, the worship of the Lord through Jagya? That's a major important instruction to Manu from Lord Brahma, and thus worship the Lord through performance of Yagya. Can you say something about that?
Well, the yajna could be also the yajna of Sankirtan yajna, chanting. It doesn't have to be, fire yajnas like that. But go ahead.
This actually, we've been trying to figure out what is Sankirtan. What is the Sankirtan movement? Is it just one thing? Is it chanting on the street? Is it what is it? It's descended from the spiritual world, right? So that's what happens in the spiritual world. Everyone's performing Sankirtan, which means everyone's engaged in this devotional service to Krishna. So I was thinking of doing real contemplation and research on that. What is the real Jagya? This is a Sankirtan Jagya. It is from the spiritual world. It is non-different, and it is an enormous amount of different activities. What do you think about that, Madhurya?
Oh, you said it. Yeah. You said it all.
I didn't say it all. Krishna says it all. All right. Why don't we go on with the next verse? Go on. The next page.
You want me to go on? Okay. So this is chapter 13, 16 to 45, the appearance of Lord Varaha. Brahma thought, while I've been engaged in the process of creation, the earth has been inundated by a deluge and has gone down into the depths of the ocean. What can we do? What can we do who are engaged in this matter of creation? It is best to let the Almighty Lord direct us. O sinless Vidura, all of a sudden, while Brahma was engaged in thinking, a small form of a boar came out of his nostril. The measurement of the creature was not more than the upper portion of a thumb. O descendant of Bharata, while Brahma was observing him, that boar became situated in the sky in a wonderful manifestation as gigantic as a great elephant.
Wow, here we go with the great incarnation of the boar. Let's see, Madhurya. Nandaji, can you read? Nanda.
I'm coming.
Okay. We're waiting.
Okay. He was personally the Supreme Lord Vishnu and was therefore transcendental. Yet because he had the body of a hog, he searched after the earth by smell. His tusks were fearful, and he glanced over the devotee Brahmins engaged in offering prayers. Thus he entered the water. Lord Boar, Lord Boar, you want to go on to somebody else so it doesn't bother you, that noise? Okay.
Wait.
With his hooves, which were like sharp arrows, and he found the limits of the ocean. Although he found the limits of the ocean, although it was unlimited. He saw the earth, the resting place for all living beings, lying as it was in the beginning of creation, and he personally lifted it. Lord Boar very easily took the earth on his tusks and got it out of the water. Thus he appeared very splendid. Then his anger, glowing like the Sudarshan wheel, he immediately killed the demon Hiranyaksha, although he tried to fight with the Lord. Can someone else go on? Because I'm expecting an important call, and that might be it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Faye, you want to continue reading?
Purport. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Vedic literatures describe the incarnation of Lord Varaha, the boar, in two different devastations, namely the Kaksusa devastation and the Swayambhuva devastation. This particular appearance of the boar incarnation actually took place in the Swayambhuva devastation, when all the planets other than the higher ones, Jana, Mahar, and Satya, merged in the water of devastation. This particular incarnation of the boar was seen by the inhabitants of the planets mentioned above. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti suggests that the sage Maitreya amalgamated both the boar incarnations in different devastations and summarized them in his description to Vidura.
Okay, before we go on, this is actually a very dramatic performance of the Lord, this boar incarnation. And since we've been reading it through the whole part of this Bhagavatam series, there's been lessons posted. We're in this section of the Bhagavatam. If you're following it, it is most dramatic and it's a divine drama of the Lord lifting the earth and placing her on the water and fighting with Hiranyaksha. It is just a marvelous presentation of the wonders of Krishna I just wanted to add that. This is because we had a little interruption there, which is normal for the material world, because all this glory of the Lord, then Maya says, okay, she blocks it. But this is such a splendid, magnificent pastime of the Lord. No one can conquer it. It is just, I just with great enthusiasm, suggest everyone to get into a deep meditation of Krishna coming as the boar and lifting up the earth out of the water of devastation and fighting with the demon. The first time I read it, I was just overwhelmed. It was a fantastic drama. Okay.
Before we go on here, so basically,
okay, it's getting late.
Basically what's happened here is that I wanted to, for the purposes of this Zoom and the purposes of the review, go over those parts which were probably more distant in memory. This pastime of the appearance of Lord Varaha, the two appearances of Lord Varaha being discussed, this is all sort of fresh in everyone's memory. So for the rest of this presentation, all I've done is listed the chapter headings with some images to bring it back to memory and put it into context. But we can see that up until now, up until this appearance of Lord Varaha, which appeared when Manu was given his duties, Lord Brahma instructed him, please guide mankind properly. And Manu said, yes, I'll follow your order, but this place where the living entities are living, the Earth planet, has fallen. What should I do? So from the glance of Mahavishnu over the unmanifest material nature, all the way up to the population of Manu and Sadarupa and their children, is what we've covered thus far in the third canto. So Sami, you want to pick somebody who can just read these titles as we go through them, and we'll follow like that.
Okay, Mandantara, could you read these? Thank you, Faye. Mandantara, why don't you read these as we pass through them?
Okay, but before we read it, can I just add one thing?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay, so when I just caught it when we were reading it, Lord Brahma, his mind slipped somehow, and then the earth fell from his meditation. And it kind of reminds me, I don't know why I'm on this Gayatri trip, but sometimes when I'm in Gayatri, my mind does slip, and and I'm wondering if that's what actually happened with Lord Brahma.
I don't know. Pati, can you answer that?
I don't know.
I didn't hear anything where Lord Brahma wasn't paying attention or his mind slipped. That wasn't the reason that the earth fell into the Garbhodaka ocean. Okay. So no, but certainly that happens to us all. Bhagavad Gita, what does Bhagavad Gita say? From wherever and whenever the mind wanders due to its nature, what should one do? Can anyone say?
Yeah, bring it back.
Very good.
Back.
Excellent.
To concentration on the self.
Right.
Yeah. Wonderful. So we're always being challenged by that, right? It doesn't take much for the conditioned soul to look away. It's always the challenge. So we have all of this fantastic Vedic literature. So Sesha, were you going to say something?
Yeah, just perhaps what Mantar was referring to is Brahma says, while we were engaged in this matter of creation, generation, the earth fell. So it's almost indicating like he took his mind off it.
Oh, that could be. And he has 4 heads. Can you imagine us? And really, right? That's yeah. All possibilities.
Chapter 14, pregnancy of Diti in the evening. Chapter 15, description of the kingdom of God. Chapter 16, the 2 doorkeepers of Vaikuntha, Jaya and Vijay, cursed by the sages. Chapter 17, victory of Hiranyaksha over all the directions of the universe. Chapter 18, the battle between Lord Boar and the demon Hiranyaksha. Chapter 19, the killing of the demon Hiranyaksha.
So you can see that all those different sections from the pregnancy of Diti at the inappropriate time resulted in the birth of the two demons. The darkness covered the universe. The demigods inquired from Brahma what had happened. He started to describe the history when his four sons, the Kumaras, traveled to Vaikuntha, the description of God, the kingdom of God, and then the birth of the demons, and then the battle between Lord Bor and Hiranyaksha, which brings us to the end of this particular narration, which brings us to the end of that section that we're going to stop at now. And the next chapter is again Vidura becoming inspired by these descriptions by Maitreya to inquire further. So there's a conversation between Maitreya and Vidura, and then we'll go on to subsequent the progeny of Manu with his daughter Devahuti and her husband Kardama Muni, and then the pastimes of Lord Kapiladev. So what we'll do is we'll start in the beginning of October. Now we're going to take a little semester off, just like in school. We'll take a few months off, give everybody a break. All this material will remain online, so everybody can review it at your convenience. The podcasts are all still there. Try to keep current with it. And I guess you want to close up, Sama, and we'll be in touch again in a few months. Wishing everybody peace, prosperity, and Krishna consciousness.
Hare Krishna.
Until then.
Okay, before we go, does anyone have anything else to say about this? Any of these questions? I mean, I was just thinking of Lord Brahma standing there and being perplexed, and then Lord Bor comes out of his nostril. So back to what Manvantara was saying about maybe Lord Brahma was otherwise engaged, and then the Bor comes out of his nose. He is not all-knowing. He does, only Krishna knows what he's thinking. Only Krishna knows what Lord Brahma is thinking. But he was surprised that the Lord, who was the all-pervasive supreme of everything, came out of his nose. That was I thought that was fascinating. I'm very fascinated by this Lord Bor whole history. I think it's actually and when he lifts up the earth, it's like they're having and they had a loving exchange because a demon was born. And anyway, Faye, would you like to say something?
I have a quick question for you before we leave. This is something that I've been wondering about. Many times as we've read recently, particularly the pregnancy of DT, the time before her delivery, there were many mentions of darkness. I keep thinking of the many mentions of light with Devaki when she was incarcerated by her brother Kamsa. While she was expecting Krishna, the scriptures describe the demigods coming to see her and check on her, and her being so radiantly filled with light. Kamsa didn't even notice that light, whereas with all of the things that we've been reading about Diti and the subsequent birth of the demonic twins and that darkness, I was just astounded by the difference of light and dark. And I wondered if anyone else had noticed that, or is it just my imagination? Thank you.
It's definitely not your imagination. See, that's why we quote scripture, because it's not our imagination. It's a very wonderful observation. Anyone to have something that's beautiful. The way you said it was very nice. Does anyone have something to say? Vaishnava, you have appeared. Do you want to say something about darkness and light? How we see darkness is coming when demons are born. Darkness prevails. Darkness and horrible things happen. You can see, and natural disasters. That means demons are being born. And there's Nandaji.
Hare Krishna. Well, darkness is always compared to nescience. Light is always compared to illumination. So because Krishna was illuminating the world with his presence and attracting everyone to the process of bhakti, there's so much illumination within Devaki and manifested. And then because Diti was giving birth to demons, there was so much darkness because it's nescience. And interestingly enough, just what you were just saying, Sama, was about when demons are being born, there's all these different natural disturbances. And when you read that, what do you think of? You think of the headlines. There was fire everywhere. There was flooding. Trees were falling down without gusts of wind. So many indications. Prabhupada says all of those indicate that the demoniac population is increasing.
Right, exactly.
Like creepy.
What is the heading at the top of every BTG? Srila Prabhupada put it, Godhead is light, darkness is nescience.
Yeah. Maya Surya Sama Krishna Haya something. That's
Very good. That's it.
Sanskrit spaghetti.
Anyway, the English, back to Godhead. That's what we want. That's the English. Perfect. Anyone else have something to say? Closing words for a few months here. Sesha, can you share something with us? And then Gopa, I want to hear from Gopa too. Yes, Sesha ji.
Just thank you to the two of you for hosting these Zoom discussions and giving some guided research for studying Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very helpful.
Thank you for your participation regularly. It was wonderful.
Yeah, that was a very special thing. Gopaji, can you tell us something before we end this?
Godhead is light, nescience is darkness. Where there is Godhead, there is no nescience.
There it is.
Godhead.
And there's Madhurya showing her beautiful face in there. What do you got to say, Madhurya ji? Oh, she went away.
I just wanted to thank you for your dedication and giving these classes for years and years and years without wavering. So
I tell you,
appreciate you.
It's all self-motivated. I want association for this because it's so exciting. It's so exciting. This is what I want. This is what we need. We need devotee association to talk about the transcendental activities of the Lord. And then we forget that we're in the material world. That's good. Forget about the illusion. Remember the light. Thank you.
Well, this week when we didn't have any of the podcast to listen to, it was like a void. And
Nishians.
and then on Saturdays now we're not going to have this class, so we're going to miss it.
Yes, thank you. Ian, did you want to say something, Prabhu? Your hand is up.
Okay, just a minute. Okay, so I've posted sometimes before that when I first met the devotees, I got one of the Back to Godhead magazines, and it had the questions, the interaction between Vidura and Maitreya. And also there was one with Brahma's prayers for creative energy.
Mm.
So those two topics I recall. Okay.
Wow, what an introduction to Krishna consciousness. Huh?
I was thinking, look at the interaction between Vidura and Maitreya and kind of question and answer. So I was kind of, wow.
Wow. Nice that they're dear to you.
Wonderful. Thank you
for
sharing.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your sacrifice to put for the course, and also the other participants for the interaction during the Zoom meeting. They're wonderful.
Thank you.
You and others.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all for your association. I look forward to your association in October. And more glories to Srila Prabhupada. Let's just go back to Godhead because we don't want any more Nishians. We want the light.
Tell us what you're going to do for those few months.
We are going to the American Himalayas, and that's it. No communication, just chanting and reading.
We're going to do some internal work.
Internal work. That's the guy. We'll let you know when we come back. Vanchikapatarudyascha Kripasindhubhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namo. Thank you, dear devotees. Glory to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Gaur Premanande.
Hare Hare Bol.